On behalf of my colleagues on the UC Santa Cruz Foundation Board, welcome to the 2013 Foundation Forum. This is an annual tradition and a wonderful opportunity for you to hear from one of this year's distinguished awardees. Frank Gehry, one of the world's leading architects, will be honored this evening with the Foundation Medal at the Founders Celebration Dinner. This year's forum will be a conversation with Frank Gehry, led by Paul Goldberger, a contributing editor at Vanity Fair, whom the Huffington Post has called the leading figure in architecture criticism. From 1997 to 2011, Mr. Goldberger served as the architecture critic for the New Yorker magazine, where he wrote the magazine's celebrated Skyline column. In 1984, he was awarded the Pulitzer Prize for Distinguished Criticism, the highest award in journalism. Mr. Goldberger is currently writing an authorized biography of Mr. Gehry, and Mr. Goldberger will do the honors of introducing our special guest. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Frank Gehry and Mr. Paul Goldberger.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's wonderful to be here. I've been asked to not jump right into our conversation, but to give you a little bit of background on Frank Gehry, which I'm happy to do before we begin. Not a lecture, but a sort of, if you remember that old thing from Saturday Night Live called the 5-Minute University. This will be the 5-Minute University of Frank Gehry. He is a unique figure in contemporary culture, the only architect in our time to be widely admired by both critics and the general public, and has almost single-handedly transformed contemporary architecture. His Guggenheim Museum in Bilbao, Spain, which Philip Johnson called the greatest building of our time, managed to turn Bilbao from a rundown industrial city into a major international tourist destination, probably the greatest example of culture-led economic development in modern history. And it wasn't a short-lived phenomenon either. In the summer of 2010, as the building approached its 13th birthday, a panel of more than 50 of the world's leading architects, critics, and architectural historians, convened by Vanity Fair, declared the building the most important erected anywhere in the world since 1980, and voted Gehry the most important architect in the world. Here's the atrium. His impact, though, is not limited to Bilbao. His Walt Disney Hall in Los Angeles, a concert hall for the LA Philharmonic, re-energized live performance of classical music at a time when audiences elsewhere were disappearing. His Aerospace Museum near the campus of USC, his alma mater in downtown LA, shows you some of the beginnings of his style. This is one of my favorite Gehry buildings, the Winton Guest House in Minnesota. He was exploring materials, shapes, and the idea of a house as, in effect, a model village. We see more of Bilbao and Walt Disney Hall beginning to emerge in this wonderful museum in Basel, rather outside of Basel, Switzerland, for Vitra, the design company. Here's one of my favorites in Los Angeles, the Loyola School of Law, with that rather remarkable thing on the right that manages to be both abstract and classical at the same time. Here's the the American Center in Paris. No, sorry, that was the Weissman Museum in Minneapolis, and here is the American Center in Paris, and then the wonderfully named Fred and Ginger building in Prague that became a symbol of the Renaissance, of the resurgence of Eastern Europe, as his bandshell at Millennium Park in Chicago gave a sense of renewal to the nation's leading city of architecture. He's also designed the tallest apartment tower in New York, the 8 Spruce Street at Beekman Street, and the Ruvo Center for Alzheimer's Research in Las Vegas. He is also surely the only architect in the world to have ever been the subject of an episode of The Simpsons. Perhaps the ultimate proof of the extent to which he's entered popular culture, even as his work continues to push the most advanced boundaries of architectural expression. His ubiquity, not to mention his ability to bridge popular and high culture, is almost unprecedented in architecture, and is rare in almost any field. It's as if David Foster Wallace were as well-known a novelist as John Grisham, or if Philip Glass had shot to the top of the Billboard charts to rival Lady Gaga. But Gehry's fame, in the end, emerges out of his architecture, not his persona. His own house in Santa Monica, a conventional Dutch colonial that he remade in 1978 to look more or less as if it had been exploded, and then covered with corrugated metal and chain link fencing, first brought him significant international attention. Not only because of the striking nature of its shapes and materials, but because of the way it seemed at once like an ordinary house and an extraordinary otherworldly object, the familiar and the unfamiliar visible together in constant tension. His building, here's another view, but his building in Bilbao took these ideas to a whole new level, a composition of swirling, curving sheets of titanium. It was likened at various times to a vast artichoke, a metal rose, an abstract sculpture, and an exploded version of Frank Lloyd Wright's original Guggenheim in New York City. In reality, it was none of those things. The Guggenheim Bilbao, startling as its appearance was the logical culmination of a whole series of events in Gehry's life. He's lived in Los Angeles for more than 6 decades now, and at the beginning of his career, he was more a part of the Los Angeles art community than its architectural one. He saw himself as an outsider almost in the architectural world, but there was always a formal, powerful instinct at work, a sculptor's sensibility filtered through an architectural eye. Bilbao's extraordinary swirling masses and shapes were actually the outgrowth of forms that you've seen a moment ago that he'd been working on for a long time. His imagination often outpaced the ability of engineers and contractors to figure out how to build the structures he designed. And so they used software developed for the aircraft industry, which enabled engineers to calculate with precision those dramatic and curving forms. Without it, that building could not have been built. After Bilbao and its great success, Gehry faced a dilemma rare among architects, a challenge more like that of a writer who'd been celebrated for a great novel, who then has to get beyond his own work, not to be trapped in it, to continue to do new and creative things. Here is one of the most important, a building that was designed for Beijing as the National Art Museum of China. Extraordinary things being done with glass here, and the building is almost as if it were a monumental glass block. And something much closer to here, this is a model of his design for the new headquarters for Facebook. Here you see another view of it with a garden on top, an enormous single workspace, and parking below. So the post-Bilbao era for Gehry was a very special and different kind of challenge as he tried to do new, creative, and different things, even as the public, because of the great success of that, was expecting more of the same for him. It was a period in which he realized, as he once told me, how success is much harder to deal with than failure. I think that's actually a wonderful moment to ask Frank if he can join us on stage and we can begin our conversation. So, Frank Gehry. So success is harder to deal with than failure.
Who said that?
You said that.
Oh.
You said that to me once. Have you changed your mind?
Well, you know, your perceptions of failure and success change. You know, I had to do that letter to myself recently for Charlie Rose, and I had to talk to myself as a kid about what you're going to get when you, for the future. And I told myself then, you're not going to listen anyway, so. I think that it's hard, if you're human, not to be competitive with have sibling rivalry. It's hard to not think that you've been left behind by somebody when you should have gotten something. I think that's the human condition. Sure. You get it, I get it, everybody gets it. Whatever I've done has led me to be very comfortable in terms of the status of symbols that the world. I have a car. So I don't know. I think I've been very successful, I think, and I'm happy about it, and I'll complain anyway.
No, that's also part of the human condition.
Right.
To be, satisfied, but never. If
Right.
you're 100% satisfied, then that becomes complacency, which is not so good. That letter to your younger self that you did for PBS News began by saying, I guess the most important advice I would give to you is to keep a copy of Don Quixote and Alice in Wonderland at your bedside for your entire life.
I do.
You do, in fact, keep
I do. I have it, and whenever I get sort of disgruntled or something, I open the book and read chapters. Cervantes was amazing, as was Carroll.
Do you?
I think we're in that, whether you like it or not, we're all in that kind of world.
Sure.
It's too bad it's called the Tea Party, but.
Actually, it couldn't be. Lewis Carroll knew where from he spoke.
But you do know when you go through the looking glass. You know, when you're working on a project and it's all very serious with program and budget, and there's got to be a kind of innocence, like the kid that tells the truth somehow. Mm-hmm. And so to preserve that in the process, so that, and to be able to, but I do it through architecture, mm-hmm. and to be willing to take the stuff that comes at you for doing that, because initially, when I showed the models of the Walt Disney Concert Hall publicly, they were called broken crockery. When I showed the models of the Bilbao building in Bilbao, there was an article in the paper, "Kill the American Architect." And that was serious at that time, because it was at that time that the separatists were bombing everybody.
Right.
And it was scary. And whenever I got into public, I stood next to the president.
But the separatists came around pretty quickly to realize that the building was...
Yeah, I think
They've
now,
done so much for the image of of Catalonia, that region of Spain.
well, they were looking for an identity.
Right.
And so it's calmed down the separatists. It's amazing that a building could participate in that game, but it did.
Do you think the building did, we know it brought extraordinary economic development to Bilbao. Do you think it also brought a degree of political stability?
Well, I never claimed that, but recently a gentleman from far away who wants me to do a project called me. He's a high prime minister type. And he said he wanted me to come and do what Bilbao did for the politics. So that guy believed it, I don't know.
This guy didn't have to be calling you from Washington, D.C.
No.
I mean, it would not be a bad thing, maybe, if that could happen.
Washington, D.C. I'm sorry you brought that up.
We can move on quickly. We're not here to talk about Washington, D.C.
And Eisenhower.
Right. But yes, okay. Now
You want to talk, huh?
Washington is a city in which you've not yet designed a building. You had a project for the Corcoran Gallery of Art that
Yeah,
ultimately
and it's one of the, I think it's one of the best things I ever done.
Yeah.
And it was working drawings complete, was on budget, contract ready to go. And one board member stopped it.
Right.
It was kind of,
Well, I think if I remember correctly, the Corcoran, which was a spectacularly beautiful project, it wasn't over budget, but it was that they discovered they didn't really have the money they thought they did, and they told you to design to. So
probably.
yeah, I mean, so that you didn't do anything wrong except
I forgot that part.
you didn't do anything wrong except their statement at one point that they had X dollars, and then when they discovered they had half of X dollars,
Yeah,
it didn't happen.
yeah, that's true.
Anyway.
The Eisenhower thing is,
Eisenhower is going on right now, and that's your competition-winning entry to do a memorial to Dwight D. Eisenhower.
so I read a book by Ambrose, who was a Eisenhower biographer, and probably everybody knows a lot about Eisenhower, but if you don't, read that book. I just fell in love with this person because when I was in the Army, I was in his 3rd Infantry Division, 3rd Army. He was president then. And I remember, as many of you might remember, that he was always playing golf, and everybody thought he was not doing much. And when you read this book and you realize his accomplishments, they were extraordinary. And so I entered the competition and won it. And I thought that was it.
Right.
There's all kinds of things that happen to you after that, including Darrell Issa's committee subpoenaing my records.
Did you expect to win the competition?
No,
Okay.
did not.
But then why, it's interesting because usually competitions are entered, the architects who enter competitions not expecting to win are usually young architects looking for the experience.
Yeah.
You were not in the category of a young architect looking for experience.
No, I really got into who he was.
Right, okay.
And I brought in Robert Wilson, who's a theater guy, does Einstein on the Beach and stuff, who's also an actor. And I asked Bob to consult with me and help me, because he, as an actor, he builds characters and he understands that. And I wanted to understand Ike and to portray the essence of him. So I really got into it. And the site is terrible, and all of the buildings, Eisenhower, the Department of Education, Public Health, and the FAA surround this site. and they're not great buildings.
It's really a kind of bad Washington intersection that they want to turn into a park, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Anyway, we did it. We're on budget. It's been approved by Fine Arts several times now. And National Capital Planning Commission, I think, is Ms. Napolitano in here? If you could make somehow the next appointee to the national, anyway.
Yeah, it's true that, I mean, getting something built in Washington, D.C. is only slightly less complicated than getting something built on a University of California campus, I think, actually.
Oh, now you're talking.
Right.
I ain't going to go there.
But tell us just really quickly what the design is, because it's not one of the images we showed. So
it's not. Okay, so there's 3 buildings, and Independence Avenue and the back end of Aerospace. And so I made a tapestry along in front of Education, about 75 feet in front of it, and then one in front of the Health and one in front of FAA. And they sort of form a courtyard of columns, and I used round columns as sort of echo of classical Washington architecture. The screens, the idea of tapestries comes from the Middle Ages, the telling stories on that way, and it hasn't been done at this scale. And we found a way of making a tapestry with stainless steel wire that's quite photographic. I mean, I don't want to get it too photographic. We're trying to have a sense of an artist to it, but the tapestry is just creating the environment and collecting all the bits and pieces together in an organized way. And it shows Abilene, Kansas, where Ike lived. He wasn't born there, but he lived there, grew up there, and he's buried there. And he talked about Abilene in all of his speeches, almost always talked about it. And Abilene is 150 miles from the geographic center of the United States, I've been told. I believed them. And so, in a way, it's bringing the middle of America to Washington, where there is no representation of it. And then in front of it,
let's not go there.
Yeah.
But anyway, okay. Let's say no architectural representation and leave it at that.
That's
okay.
what I meant.
Right. Okay.
And then in the center, there's a block. There are 2 blocks like this facing toward the street, and on one of them is Eisenhower as the general. The famous picture of him talking to the troops the day of the invasion at Normandy. Mm-hmm. And we found one of those soldiers alive and have interviewed him. Mm-hmm. So it was the 82nd Airborne and the 101st represented. And there's a relief that shows the landing. And then on that block, there's carved into the stone the speeches he gave about that time. And then on the other block is Eisenhower as the president meeting with members of the cabinets to sign this, I believe, the Civil Rights Bill. There's the questions of which everything you do has a lot of people questioning. So they're not sure it should be civil rights, it should be highway, it should be whatever. So that kind of stuff goes on. And so that's it. The pushback has been from a very conservative, it's a startup thing. I don't know where they came from. It's a group led by a young man who calls me a nihilist because I wear black shirts. And And that group had a competition for the counter competition, in which Eisenhower has
Right.
one of those oak leaf things and a toga. And in the last hearing, the guy said something about I was portraying Ike as a hick. And I said, you know, he's from Middle America. And young man, I think that's un-American, what you just said. So, anyway, we don't know if this thing's going to get built or not. They've thrown every kind of...
Well, the recent unfortunate thing, it seems to me, is how some, not all, but some of his descendants, his granddaughters, sort of made common cause with the classical architecture Taliban, and because they decided they wanted it to look more like the Lincoln Memorial or whatever, and so I think that kept that argument going. It might have died away if the family hadn't joined in.
That's how it's represented in the press. I'm not sure they really want that. I think they really don't want that kind of a memorial.
Okay, I hope that's true. I hope that that's the case.
They're really nice people. I've come to like them, even though they would like to kill me. But Susan Eisenhower is brilliant and has a lot of reasons for everything, but it just isn't the way it was set up. I mean, I would agree with her. If you could have an Eisenhower Institute like Woodrow Wilson has, then that's probably more interesting than some blocks of stone and things. But I didn't enter a competition for that.
Right.
So.
But also the quest to continually find new ways to use architecture to honor the past is very important. I mean, now, remember there was a bitter fight about Maya Lin's Vietnam Veterans Memorial, and now it's one of the most admired things in Washington.
Yeah.
And yet we don't seem to have learned anything from it.
Well, the Roosevelt Memorial took 20 years with family squabbles.
And actually that one ended up as a very weak compromise, I think. Yeah, very watered down. So why don't we come a little closer to this part of the world. I was actually supposed to move back to the slide with the university seal on it, but I forgot, so I'm afraid I apologize. So we still have Facebook up there. So let's talk about Facebook for a moment. That was my mistake, but nevertheless, let's turn it to advantage and talk about that for a moment. How did you come to be how did you, as a very distinguished, world-renowned architect in his 80s, come to be doing...
Working with a 30-year-old kid. Right.
Right. Have a 30-year-old kid as your client, exactly. Okay, right.
Well, we were introduced through, I guess, a mutual friend. And I think that the idea of capital A architecture probably is and was scary to Mark Zuckerberg. It's not his main event.
Right.
But he was trying to create something that fits his culture, which is hardworking, freewheeling, free association, with a lot of people coming and going and sleeping at their desks in work sessions that last 2 days without stop, and kind of searching for new ways to expand his network program. And he came to visit my office, and he liked that because I had such a place. My room.
Do you mean where you keep people working for 2 days sleep without any sleep and all that? Okay.
Exactly like that. And so he liked my space. He had already, they already had a design from another architect. And that architect had 4 buildings different buildings, blocks with offices in it, and a separate parking garage. And when Mark liked what I was doing, I said, well, we can make one big room 10 acres, like my room, and we can lift it off the ground over parking. And so you can park near where you know, if somebody's down at that end, they can park down at that end. And we can put a solar thing on the roof, and everything would be very sustainable, and all the issues that all of us are seriously involved with. And he liked that. And we presented it to his, I guess, 500-600 of his employees. And we talked about putting a garden on the roof, which was an addition. So I was under budget from the other architect without the garden on the roof. And a building that he liked better. So that was pretty good. And then he likes walking around. He does a lot of walking when he talks to people, when he's thinking. Very active physically like that. And so we talked about the options for planting to make a green roof, and then what would it take to make it a park. And it wasn't that bad. It's about a 10% kick to the budget.
A public park, or just a
No.
a garden for the Facebook employees?
For them.
Okay,
and I was worried that, okay, you build it, would they use it? They're so intense in their workstations. And we agonized about that for a few weeks while we went through the staff to make, if you're going to spend that extra money, to make sure it was usable, and they wanted it, so that's what we're doing. There are openings from in the workspace up into the park, so you can walk up a ramp and you're in the park from where you're working. And they started construction, so 18 months from now it'll be there.
Right. You seem to be almost at pains to be reminding us that your buildings aren't kind of wild and crazy and expensive, that they can be...
Okay, ask, how many people in this room think I'm expensive? Put up your hand, come on, tell the truth.
Yes, I think more than half, I would say.
Yeah,
okay.
Well, it's usually the whole thing, we've made them self-conscious.
So you've gotten a bad rap, you think, on that?
Yeah, I've never been over budget with a project. And unless the client adds stuff,
right,
or some cataclysmic circumstance. But knock wood. And I'm proud of that, because I think it means you can do stuff as long as the budgets are real. When I'm like the thing in Hamburg, I was offered that job in the concert hall.
Right.
135 million euros at the time. It would have cost 500 million euros to build it just on a flat piece of ground, let alone on top of it. And a friend of mine was selecting the architect, and he wanted me to do it. And I turned it down. And the guys got it, who accepted it, are now at 5 times that budget. And it's going to be worth it. The building they designed is really beautiful. But I would commit suicide if that happened to me. I wouldn't be able to live with myself.
Yeah, I mean, you seem to really want to make the case that great architecture does not have to break the bank.
Right. I think that's true.
And
it doesn't have to be done by prima donnas. You can be normal people and have a normal relationship and build good stuff, which is, for what better or for worse, that's what I've done.
Right. I mean, I think another theme of your work, if I can can say this is that you've consistently designed unconventional spaces, but they are not necessarily, as you've just been trying to say, incredibly expensive, or they're not necessarily disquieting and uncomfortable either. That you seem to be eager to make the point that an unusual modern building can be as comfortable to be in as a conventional, traditional house. It just reaches that comfort in a different way.
Well, I think that we're making spaces for people. That's
right.
Number one priority. So, and so I don't want them to have to stand on their head to look out the window, which a friend of mine did in a building. I think you can engage people. At the Walt Disney Concert Hall, I made the interior of the hall symmetrical.
A very un-Gehry-esque thing.
Yeah, nobody would have
yeah.
thought I'd do that. And the models were of Sharon were not symmetrical, that the client was interested. But I thought my work would be challenging, let's say, and that so people go in and sit down, they feel comfortable. At least they have I call it a handrail they can hang on to and then take their time to wonder about the rest of it.
Right. I mean, it's a very voluptuous and rich space that is never uncomfortable, it seems to me. It just to...
Well, the whole issue with performing spaces is the relationship between the performer and the audience. So this thing here is preventing us from getting to know each other better.
Should we pull our chairs forward?
So in the case of a concert hall or any theater, that they're more successful when that feeling of together works, especially in a concert hall where I was on a program like this last week with Esa-Pekka Salonen, the former conductor of the LA Phil, who was part of my client group when I did the building. He was talking about his feelings getting to the podium and starting to conduct. And not only the acoustics was supportive, he could feel the bass sound, the bass vibration, which was something unusual for him in the former hall. And then he could feel the audience. He could sense that he was in touch with the audience. And the orchestra also felt that and played better. And the audience responded through the air, through this magical relationship you and I have right now. It's palpable in the concert hall to feel the interrelationship, which they talk about, the musicians talk about, and he talked about. And it makes for a unique experience. And people wonder about how did that happen.
Right. It's much more than just visibility, though.
Right.
I mean, they both sides feel that they're in a special place together and having.
Yeah.
Right.
And that really works. It was interesting hearing Esa-Pekka talk about it because I hadn't heard him.
I mean, I think it's 10 years this month, I guess, since it opened, right? Or last month.
I think today, 23rd. What's today?
23rd of October. That's next week. So. Okay. So it is 9 years and 51 weeks old at this point, and it seems to have been pretty widely accepted now as sort of the preeminent concert hall of modern times. And then,
so guess what they're doing? They're building a subway under it.
Yes, you told me that. So what's that going to do?
I don't know. It could be devastating, actually. Scary.
Is there any possibility of...
You know, this concert hall is built next to a music school, the Colburn School, and the Cal Arts Theater. And those things were in place 8 years ago when the plan for the MTA was decided, I can't imagine what they were thinking, putting it right in the middle of those three entities.
Well, they were thinking it was convenient and forgetting the fact that subways make vibration and noise, I guess.
Yeah.
Or maybe they were thinking the fact that nobody in LA takes the subway, so it doesn't matter or something. I don't know. It's sort of, perhaps that was the thought. I don't know.
It's interesting. But, you know, we'll make sure it doesn't screw
I mean,
up.
at this point, the building is so deeply respected that it would be like tinkering with a cathedral, it seems to me.
Well,
I mean,
the director said it would be an international disgrace. So she keeps saying that. So I think
good.
that'll preclude
Good.
the bad things from happening.
Let's go back to something we began to talk about a moment ago when we talked about comfort. What do you think sort of defines your work? Is it a continual quest for new things? Is it a response to particulars in a different way, to clients, to programs? You said you design spaces for people. Of course that's true, but every architect at least claims that he's designed. No one's going to say, I designed spaces that are hostile to people, even if some of them are hostile to people. So everyone will claim that.
Yeah, but
so what makes yours actually achieve that?
Look at our cities,
Right.
which are antithetical to that
Yes,
idea.
yes.
And that's 99% of what the built environment, right?
Right.
So they may say that, but they're not doing it. And I don't understand why. It doesn't cost any extra to do it. What makes it happen? Well, I think for me, the different clients are a big factor in my not repeating myself, because I spend time trying to understand them, their needs, and that makes me come back with design or ideas that are in support of that. There's in the purpose or the mission of the building, and then try to find ways within the site, the time. I mean, times are changing. Each new building is like 5 years later from the.
Right.
So that the world is changing, and I try to live in the time I'm in, and the technology with it. So to build a historicist building seems like failure. It seems like saying, well, I don't know how to respond to the present, and so I'm going to give up and repeat the past. Having said that, there's some damn good buildings built by architects who do repeat the past.
Right.
So I just think if you're a university and you're, I remember having this talk with Larry Summers at Harvard. He said, why? We were working on the expansion of the Harvard campus. He said, why wouldn't I build everything like the business school? Everybody likes it.
Right.
And it's a Bob Stern historic, and it's very, and I like that building very much. I said, the only reason is you're a university preparing people for the future, and you're telling them that they should live in the past. And if you're comfortable with that, go for it.
He was not a force for architectural ambition at Harvard in his time there, I think. It's true. That they
Well,
were,
he's now interested in architecture. I talk to him now a lot, but that's
Right.
different time.
Right. We'll continue in a moment, but let me just take a break to remind all of you that you're welcome to write questions down on the cards that I think were given out. And if you have one, hold it up, and someone will be going up and down the aisles, and we'll bring them up here, and we'll open the conversation to all of you in the next few minutes. Since we're talking about new things, you've made technology a very, very important part of your practice. Your firm was the first to integrate software designed for the aerospace industry into the making of buildings. And you've often said that Bilbao could never have happened. The engineers would still be sitting there with their slide rules trying to figure out how to build it if it hadn't been possible digitally. Can you talk a little bit about that and the role of technology in the creative process for you?
So at Bilbao is when I discovered, for the first time, I used the technology that came from Dassault. And we got, and it's in Spain, so it was foreign contractors. And we got, the steel bids were 6 bidders, and the spread was 1%. And, and it was 18% under budget. When you get a spread of bids that are that tight, you can feel comfortable taking them. And so the tool is uncanny and kind of precise. What I'm interested in is the profession of architecture has marginalized itself by self-overprotection in a way of not wanting to take responsibility, not realizing that they had the tools to take responsibility. And so the construction industry has become lopsided. The contractors, if there's contractors in the audience, you may want to leave now. I'm about to insult you. They have become more powerful because the owner, you know, the void is, I do it like this. So that's the contractor, the architect, and the owner. And the architect becomes marginalized and becomes less important. And so the owner needs somebody to talk to the contractor, and they hire a construction manager. And so that becomes the connection. The construction managers normally that I've met are failed architects who'd like to get into a situation with somebody like me and prove how good they are. And they usually inadvertently partner with the contractor and to the detriment of the owner. That's the basic. Now, it doesn't happen like that all the time, and all contractors most of them are great. And they like what I'm saying. I mean, they like the idea of getting precision in their bidding and of not having to get into these terrible fights. 30% of the construction industry is acknowledged as waste. So if you talk about issues of sustainability, if you take 30% of the construction around the world, that's a huge, huge pile of waste. 15% of it is in change orders. This software, we did the tower. I think you showed them the...
We were quickly at the tower, the 8 Spruce Street apartment tower in New York, yeah.
That exterior skin, which is like this, was done with no change orders, 0. So if you save the 15% of what that would have been.
And for roughly the cost of a flat metal skin, right?
So we were able to do that curved facade. The only reason to do that curved facade was not just decoration. Those are bay windows. So each one of those bubbles, if you're in the apartment, is a bay window.
Thank you.
And so you're walking out, and it's pretty spectacular. And it didn't cost a lot more to accomplish it because of the software. So, and I started a software company because nobody else was doing it, and I need help. I'm very good at running my own service company, but to have a separate service company at my side, I just can't. It's like a gnat. I don't want to bother with it.
So,
But it seems to me you're also working on trying to make the point that, we often think of technology as allowing infinite replication of the same thing. And you're using it in a very different way to create a unique object
Right.
that we might not be able to afford to make today in today's economics.
Right.
So
But, so now the younger generation is using computers, and a lot of people are designing with the computer almost right to the construction documents. And it's a sort of what the pitfall has been so far is that shortcut has allowed, first of all, the architect's fees to be less, so everybody likes that. And it's quicker. And the problem with it is the software then designs the building. So the parametrics of the software, you can recognize it in a lot of buildings. I can recognize which software so-and-so is using to do. And so, I mean, maybe that's okay if it's used well, and some people know how to do that. But what I've tried to do is use the parametrics in a smaller scale. So
thank you.
Analyzing these forms for flats, the percentage of flat surface, percentage of cylindrical surface, and then the percentage of spherical surface. And if I can keep the flat and the cylindrical to 90% of the building, 45 each, and 10% to the spheres, and it's easy to analyze the forms that way. And you can get freer shapes, you can have more variety and more expressive, and you can stay within budgets that way. So
We have actually a wonderful group of questions here, and I'm going to ask your apologies in advance. They're actually all good, but since we're not supposed to be here through dinner, we're going to have to be selective. So I apologize in advance if we do not use your question. Let me start with one, though, that hits close to home here, I guess. It's, how can a building unify a campus that is spread out?
Wow. Well, the good thing here is if the buildings don't look good, you can plant trees in front of them. I don't know the answer to that. That's what came to mind when you said it.
Right. Well, wasn't it Frank Lloyd Wright who said, doctors get to bury their mistakes, but architects can only plant ivy? So, I'm going to put a couple of questions together. One asks, what project are you working on next, and which one do you have particular emotional ties to? And then how do you select which projects you do?
Well, how I select is how comfortable I am with the project, the people, and if I feel like I can contribute to it, and that we can create a mutual respect partnership. A lot of stuff comes at people like me from somebody that wants to use the name and just do it quick, it's a 80-story building, you can do it in a week.
We want Gehry Light.
Yeah.
Right.
And so that's a sort of a exaggerated version, but there are a lot of stuff comes at you like that, and so I'm very polite and usually have passed on stuff, even when I needed work. I've always felt, and I talked about this in my notes to self, that a teacher told me that you have to do, whatever you do, it has to be the best thing you've ever done. because you're going to be judged by that last work. And I think that's pretty accurate. And so I'm careful about being able to really do something. Now, it's like Zuckerberg he's not really interested in, as I said, in capital A architecture, but it was an intriguing problem, intriguing fellow, a nice, interesting person to work with.
And it seems to me as though you're also very interested in convincing people who are not interested in capital A architecture that there can be a value to it. I mean, part of Bilbao, I think, is how many people who were not interested in architecture got excited about architecture because of it.
Well, Bilbao, when I went there, was a dead city. They were losing, kids would graduate high school and leave. The industry was dead. Shipping and steel industry, and the separatists were blowing things up. It's totally changed. The kids stay there. The amount of applicants for university, a lot of them, there's a big percentage go into architecture. I'd like to tell them not to, but but they do, and so they're inspired by it. I think we learned that from the Sydney Opera House, that a building like that can brand a whole country.
Right.
So it's possible, and in the case of Bilbao, that building cost $300 a square foot to build, and it's last year 82% of the 400 million euros that the city earned came from people coming to visit the building, which is kind of crazy. But
you should have taken a royalty instead of a fee, actually.
And I think so. Architecture has a power, and it's kind of interesting to use it but not abuse it. The Disney Concert Hall, the Chamber of Commerce now has it being more important than the Hollywood sign. Can you believe that? I always thought the Hollywood sign was kind of a smear on the landscape, you know? It's a rickety old thing. But people love it, and anyway.
Let's come back here to this campus again. There's an intriguing question that says UCSC is embarking on a campaign branding UCSC as, quote, the original authority on questioning authority. Can you speak to this theme as it is reflected in your work? How does your work
question authority?
Yes. How does your work question authority?
I'd be more interested to see how that theme plays out architecturally at UC Santa Cruz.
Okay. Has it heretofore?
I say they plant trees in front of stuff.
Right.
Architecturally, you're not noted.
Although Kresge College, I think, is sort of nice.
Yeah, Charles Moore did a nice
Yes,
one.
yes.
But you're not alone. Most universities don't have. Princeton made a case of doing.
Yale
has had better. SC, where I graduated, has never called me to do anything. So. Nor any of my friends who graduated.
Right. Yeah, no, it is not an uplifting environment architecturally.
No.
USC.
Well, none of them are.
Right. Okay. In an interview in Conversations with Frank Gehry, you mentioned the spirit of play that informs some of your work. Could you talk for a moment about this spirit and how it's brought to bear in your buildings despite pressure of deadlines, budgets, and other constraints?
So when you're a little kid, you play with your friends, and that becomes the beginnings of your socialization, and it continues to create relationships through your life into your business world, into your other worlds. But you hear people of all disciplines, and you hear it a lot in the business world, is you'll hear somebody say, well, let's have a retreat with the senior staff and kick around, play around with some ideas. I mean, that's normal kind of, and it's kind of the same. That's who we are as people. We do play with ideas. We do test things, play with things. We try to, the creative, the most incredible business and people are creative. They're artists in that sense, in the same way that they're exploring, as you've seen in this area with the computer, Silicon Valley. Mm-hmm. It's all about play, in a sense. It's serious play, but
right.
But it's trying to maintain a kind of an innocence, and I think that has to do with feeling that you're better in touch with what's happening than if you come in pro forma. If you come in with the pro forma thing, you're dealing with the past, and the only way to get in touch with the present and hopefully a direction is to allow yourself to play with ideas, so in that sense, that's what I meant by that.
Good. What visual artists have most inspired you? You've been connected to the world of visual art more than most architects over the years.
Well, when I got out of school, I was I worked for a Viennese guy who was a perfectionist about detail, and I loved him, and I loved what he was doing, and I really got into it. And then I started my own practice, and I ended up with wood butchers and the kind of crappy workmanship you get on house remodeling and stuff like that. And it was frustrating. And at that time, Bob Rauschenberg was doing combines, and a lot of my artist friends who I hung out with were using raw materials and things, and they were making art out of it. And at that time, LA had millions of tract homes under construction, and you saw all this wood framing, and there's a kind of a powerful beauty to it that I decided to go with it. Say, okay, quit fighting it, make it a virtue, see what happens, and it kind of worked. I don't say that the world should aspire to doing poor workmanship, but if I were to do a building in China now, the level of craftsmanship is pretty low. I would use that as a positive element rather than trying to fight it.
Right. Good. China reminds me of. I know you're often very competitive, as so many professionals are, with your fellow architects, and unhappy when a job you want doesn't go your way, as with the museum in China that we showed, which is being done by someone else. But at the same time, you've also historically been very generous to other architects and referred work to them and encouraged them and spoken well of them. What buildings of the last few years have you most admired that you did not design?
Well, I like the CCTV tower
In Beijing, Rem Koolhaas?
Yeah.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
I've never been in it, but what I like about it is, on the outside, it's a skyline building. It's a unique skyline building, because as you turn around it, it becomes other buildings. It becomes something else. And that's something I played with years ago in the Ron Davis house, that idea, and I was never able to, so I would have loved to have a building that scale to do that.
Any others? Just that one?
That's just that one.
Just that one?
Well, can I go with people who are dead, or just?
Yeah, why not? We can. There are no rules here.
Okay. Well, the guy who resonates the most with me is the guy who did the Einstein Tower.
Mendelssohn, Eric Mendelssohn.
When I was a student at SC, Eric Mendelssohn came and gave a talk, and he showed his work, and he was very arrogant, and he was very, like mean-spirited, and nobody understood him, and kind of like I am today. And so it was a turnoff, and then over the years, I became more and more interested in his drawings and how they translated into buildings. He didn't get to build a lot, but the Einstein Tower, and Paul and I visited it together, is one of those amazing buildings. If you get a chance to go to Potsdam to visit it, which has curved shapes, and it's quite extraordinary. Those commissions don't come often, so that if you look around the landscape, there aren't that many that rise to that level. Corbusier in his career, if you look back at it, it's Ronchamp, Tourette,
Villa Savoy.
The planning or the big scale stuff doesn't hold, right?
Oh no, most of it's pretty terrible, actually.
Yeah.
I mean,
it was the wrong message.
He was a great architect and a terrible urban planner, actually.
But he rose to a pretty high level, and as an urban planner, in terms of the world. Kahn did a few things. Wright, I think Wright has the most big hits, probably, of anybody.
So does Beethoven. I mean, it's it's.
And he was arrogant, Frank Gehry.
Yeah.
That was the time.
That was the time. Yes, exactly. But it's not so much about arrogance; it's just about what survives the test of time, because Wright is gone, so his arrogance is not our problem anymore. The buildings remain, so it's a different thing. They speak for themselves.
Right.
When you talked about Le Corbusier as an urban planner, it reminded me of another thing that we kind of slipped by but didn't really explore a few minutes ago. Would a city designed all of Frank Gehry buildings be a good thing or not? I mean, would you want to have a commission to do block after block after block of a city?
No, I wouldn't. I don't think that's right. I think, we've worked hard to have democracy, right? Democracy means that people have the freedom to express themselves. And I wouldn't do anything to screw around with that. So the idea of building a whole thing as a way of life, and Wright did that, and Corb did that.
Sure.
These are different times, I think.
Yes.
That to be able to build a Bilbao that changes a city, that's the scale I want to work at.
Right.
And Disney Hall. So I think you know, I'm not megalomaniac about that.
But also part of the magic of Bilbao is how it plays off against the old
Right.
city.
And
which-
I don't
yeah.
design every piece inside. I don't overdo it. I like the idea of clients bringing their own stuff to it. And especially a residence, which I don't do many of them anymore, but.
I was going to ask, actually, what would make you do a house today?
Well, I am doing one for an artist, John Baldessari. He asked me, and I love him, and it's a small house, and it's in the neighborhood. And so we accepted it. But it's tough to do a house. It's tough. It's tough. My son is doing my house because I don't want to deal with it.
I know, the client is much too difficult. That's sort of right. But, do you think you will, in fact, move into that house and leave the famous house you've been living in Santa Monica for 30 years?
I don't know. That's a question, big question. I'm 84, so moving seems rather stupid right now.
Good.
However, I've become very interested in classical music, and it's part of, in fact, if anybody here wants to design a music room or anything to do with classical music, count me in. So we're doing a little building in Berlin for Daniel Barenboim, 700 seat, and I'm doing it as a gift to the orchestra, the Divan Orchestra, which is the orchestra of Palestinians and Israelis.
Right.
And that's a powerful idea, and watching them play together has been just amazing. And so and we're doing a Dudamel thing in Venezuela with a campus for his Sistema.
So you're really at a point in your career where you can do the jobs that excite you or move you or give you some kind of fresh challenge and bring you in a new direction or something special.
Yeah, I think at this point, if it's not that interesting, I should stay out.
Right.
But I have an office I've got 3 or 4, maybe 5 very talented young people, not all guys, and that I'm nurturing. And I think inevitably I'm not going to be in that office. So I'm trying to figure out how to.
Right.
And the thing I can leave them with is a very solid technical managerial core to support them, which I didn't have when I started out. And so I'm working on that.
Great. We have sadly come to the end of our appointed time. So Frank, thank you very, very much. Please join me in thanking Frank.